For all fans of mystery and horror, join Top 10 Secret as we uncover the Fautes, Top 10 Stories of Spirit Goddesses, where terrifying and mysterious legends from around the world are revealed. These stories will not only send shivers down your spine, but also carry haunting messages from the spiritual realm. Are you ready to step into the enigmatic world of these spirit goddesses? Let the journey begin. Story 1. The Castle of the Spirit Goddess. In a faraway land, where sunlight rarely reaches, there exists a forest called Noctis Vale. Legend has it that deep within its shadowy depths resides a terrifying entity known as the Spirit Goddess, an immortal being with the power to imprison lost souls forever within her dominion. No one knows exactly when the forest came into existence, but tales of those who wandered into its darkness have been told for centuries. Those who dared to enter the forest seldom returned, and those who did brought back haunting stories they could never erase from their minds. The villagers whispered that the spirit goddess was once human, a kind-hearted witch who used her magic to help the suffering. But greed and fear corrupted those she helped. They accused her of dark sorcery and burned her alive in the village square. The flames consumed her body, but her soul did not perish. Rising from the ashes, she was reborn as an immortal being, fueled by vengeance and pain. When she returned, she dragged the entire village into an abyss, creating the cursed forest of Noctis Vale. Her castle emerged from the bones and skulls of those who had betrayed her. From that day on, she ruled as the supreme deity of the forest, a place where lost souls were bound forever. Each night, eerie whispers echoed through Noctis Vale, voices not of this world. These were the cries of trapped souls, lamenting their torment and pleading for release. Those who ventured into the forest were lured by these whispers. Some heard the voices of long-lost loved ones, while others were enticed by seductive promises from the shadows. One fateful day, a group of young hunters, intrigued by the chilling tales, decided to prove that the legends were nothing more than myths. Armed with courage and experience, they stepped into the forest, confident they would uncover its secrets. But from the moment they entered, the air changed. The whispers grew louder, calling each hunter by name and awakening memories they thought they had buried long ago. Unbeknownst to them, every step they took led them closer to the castle of the spirit goddess. After 3 days of wandering, the hunters stumbled upon the castle. It loomed in the shadows, its walls constructed of gleaming white bones, with eerie blue flames flickering in its torches. The massive gates stood ajar, as though inviting them inside. Within, the throne of the spirit goddess stood as the centerpiece, crafted entirely from human skulls. But these were not mere decorations. They were vessels containing the trapped souls of the unfortunate. Each skull whispered a story, a tale of anguish, fear, and sins carried by their former owners in life. The spirit goddess emerged, her long black hair flowing like liquid darkness, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She spoke no words, but her gaze pierced the minds of each hunter, forcing them to confront their deepest regrets and darkest sins. One of them fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness, but she only smiled, a smile that froze his soul. Then she offered them a choice: enter the labyrinth of their own painful memories and attempt to find redemption, or have their souls torn from their bodies to join her collection. None knew what lay at the end of the labyrinth, for no one who entered it had ever returned. The following morning, the nearby villagers heard a blood-curdling scream echoing from the forest. When they arrived at the edge of Noctis Vale, all they found was a pristine white skull lying in the grass. Its hollow eyes seemed to watch anyone who dared to look. From that day on, none dared to step foot into the forest again. But the curse did not end there. Those who grew curious or dared to challenge the legend often reported hearing whispers in their dreams. They felt an invisible pull toward the forest, as though the spirit goddess herself was summoning them. Once she called your name, there was no escape. It is said that the spirit goddess's crown never stops growing. Each year, new skulls appear on it, each one a silent testament to the failure of another poor soul who could not resist her dark allure. The legend ends with a chilling warning. If you hear whispers calling your name in the dead of night, ignore them. Do not turn around, and do not answer. For once the spirit goddess has noticed you, your fate will forever belong to her crown. Story 2. The Haunted Doll. In a remote village nestled deep within a forest, a chilling legend speaks of a cursed doll known as the Dark Marionette. It is said that the doll is no mere plaything, but a vessel for the tormented soul of a cursed little girl. Those who possess it are doomed to face nightmares, hauntings, and eventually death. Over a century ago, in the heart of that village, there lived a young girl named Lilith. Lilith was different from the other children. She often played alone, spoke to shadows, and spent hours in a dimly lit room. The villagers grew wary of her, believing she was touched by evil. Her mother, a skilled seamstress, made her a doll to keep her company. The doll had deep black eyes, a pale, ghostly face, and intricate stitching across its dress, an exquisite yet haunting creation. Lilith adored the doll and named it Marion, never parting from it. But soon, strange occurrences began. At night, villagers reported hearing faint laughter from Lilith's room, even when she was asleep. Children who had bullied Lilith started vanishing without a trace. Fear spread, and the villagers blamed Lilith and her family, convinced that the doll was the source of the evil. One fateful night, a mob of villagers stormed Lilith's home, carrying torches and weapons. They demanded her mother hand over the doll. In desperation, her mother refused and tried to protect her daughter. But the enraged crowd set the house ablaze, trapping Lilith and her mother inside. The flames consumed everything, but when the fire died out, the doll, Marion, remained untouched amidst the ashes. Its black eyes seemed to gleam, staring at everyone gathered there. One man, bold enough to pick it up, died mysteriously a few days later. His body was found twisted in terror, his face frozen in a silent scream. From that day, Marion began to reappear in inexplicable ways. The doll would show up in houses with children, bringing a string of eerie phenomena. Footsteps echoing at night, faint giggles in the dark, and glimpses of a pale girl standing in the shadows. It was believed that Lilith's soul had fused with the doll, carrying her pain and hatred. Every child who claimed Marion as their own became ensnared in unending nightmares. Some were driven mad, while others vanished entirely, leaving Marion behind to await its next victim. One day, a young woman named Anna, skeptical of the legend, purchased Marion from an antique shop. From the moment she brought the doll home, unsettling things began to happen. She heard laughter echoing through the halls, objects moved on their own, and her bedroom mirror reflected a little girl with black, lifeless eyes. One night, Anna woke up to find Marion sitting on her bed, staring at her with its deep black eyes. The doll didn't move, but Anna heard a whisper, "Return me to my home." Terrified, Anna threw the doll out of her window and fled the house. But the next morning when she returned, Marion was back on her bed, its eyes glinting with anger. Days later, Anna was found dead in her home, her face contorted in terror, and Marion had disappeared once again. They say Marion still exists, wandering through antique shops, waiting for its next owner. If you ever encounter a doll with deep black eyes and intricate stitching across its dress, Do not take it home. For once Marion is in your possession, Lilith's vengeful spirit will never let you go. Be cautious of the things you bring back from the darkness. Not everything is as lifeless as it seems. Story 3. The Soul Eater. Deep within the cursed forest, known as the Valley of White Bones, lies a nightmarish entity whispered about in fear. The Soul Eater. No one knows where it came from, only that it is the embodiment of darkness, an insatiable hunger that hunts for the souls of those foolish enough to step into its domain. Hundreds of years ago, the Valley of White Bones was just an ordinary forest until a dark sorcerer arrived. This sorcerer, obsessed with power and immortality, performed a forbidden ritual that involved the blood sacrifice of hundreds of innocent lives to summon an ancient entity from the abyss. But the being he called forth was no benevolent deity. It was a monstrous abomination that tore his soul apart and cursed the land forever. From that day, the forest changed. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches sharp and jagged like human bones. At the center of the forest emerged a colossal figure, the Soul Eater, a horrific amalgamation of bone, blood, and shadows. It prowled the land, eternally hungry for souls to sustain its existence. It is said that on moonless nights, the Valley of White Bones echoes with the agonizing screams of trapped souls. Those who venture into the forest never return, or if they do, they bring back madness and unrelenting nightmares. A group of young adventurers, dismissing the legends as mere superstition, decided to test their courage. They wanted to prove that the Valley of White Bones was nothing but an old wives' tale. On a moonless night, armed with flashlights and misplaced confidence, they entered the forest. But from the very first step, they could feel something was wrong. The air grew colder, and the sound of rustling leaves surrounded them, even though there was no wind. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A massive ancient tree with branches that looked like skeletal fingers. At its base was a gigantic cracked pumpkin filled with thick, dark red blood and mangled, grotesque shapes. One of the girls in the group, mesmerized by the sight, approached it. Her friends called out to her, but she seemed entranced, hearing only a voice that whispered in her mind, "You have come. I've been waiting for you." From the shadows, the Soul Eater emerged. Towering and monstrous, it unfurled its skeletal form from the tree, its hollow eyes glowing with darkness, and its mouth stretching impossibly wide as if to swallow the entire world. The girl screamed, but no sound escaped her lips. Sharp branches shot out from the tree, piercing her body and dragging her into the blood-filled pumpkin, where countless souls writhed and wailed in eternal torment. The remaining group fled in terror, but one by one, the darkness claimed them. Every time the Soul Eater touched someone, their soul was torn from their body, leaving behind a lifeless husk with wide, terrified eyes. In the end, only one survivor remained, a young man who hid beneath a gnarled tree, trembling as he watched the nightmare unfold. The Soul Eater slowly turned toward him, its blood-stained grin revealing shards of struggling souls still trapped between its jagged teeth. It spoke in a voice that echoed through his mind, sending shivers down his spine. "Go forth and tell my story. Let the others know. Once you step into the darkness, there is no escape." The young man escaped the forest, but he could never truly leave it behind. Each night, he was haunted by dreams of the Soul Eater, of his friends, and of the voices calling out to him. "You think you've escaped? Your soul still belongs to me." Weeks later, he was found dead in his home. His body was contorted unnaturally, his face frozen in absolute terror. Written in blood on the wall above him were the words, "I will return, and you will not escape." Locals claim that on moonless nights, screams and whispers can still be heard emanating from the Valley of White Bones. Some swear they've seen shadowy figures wandering the forest, their hollow eyes reflecting a tragic fate. They warn all who dare to approach. Do not call his name in the dark, and never set foot in the forest. Once the Soul Eater sees you, your soul belongs to him for eternity. Story 4. The Violinist Under the Moon. Centuries ago, on a remote, isolated cliff, there lived a renowned violinist named Elior. Known for his unparalleled talent, Elior's music could make people weep, laugh, or fall into a trance. He and his beloved Lyra shared a beautiful life together, dreaming of a bright future filled with love and music. But fate is cruel. One fateful day, Lyra slipped and fell to her death from the cliff while picking wildflowers for Elior. Her death shattered his world. Overwhelmed by despair, Elior abandoned his fame and secluded himself on the cliff where Lyra had died. When his sorrow reached its breaking point, Elior turned to forbidden practices. He learned of an ancient ritual that could summon the soul of the dead. Under the full moon, with his violin in hand, Elior performed the ritual, pouring his grief into a melody so sorrowful it seemed to bleed from his heart. But instead of bringing Lyra back, the ritual opened a gateway to another realm, a void of darkness where ancient, malevolent entities dwelled. These entities emerged, engulfing Elior in a vortex of despair and hatred. The darkness consumed his soul, cursing him to exist eternally between life and death. Elior was no longer human. On the cliff, he sat, gaunt, pale, and hollow-eyed, like a phantom of the past. His violin was no longer a simple instrument, but had transformed into a vessel forged from blood and the souls of the damned. Each time Elior played, the melody became a siren's call, luring the curious and the sorrowful toward him. The music was haunting yet beautiful, like the weeping of lost souls in an endless abyss. Those who heard it could not resist its pull, wandering into the darkness toward its source. As they neared the cliff, reality twisted. No longer was there a moonlit landscape, only a void where time and space collapsed. Elior didn't kill with his hands. He let his music strip away the souls of his listeners, note by agonizing note, like blades carving through their flesh and spirit. These souls didn't disappear. They were trapped inside his violin, their anguished cries adding to the melody that Elior played each night. One full moon night, a young, ambitious violinist named Caleb heard the melody echoing from the cliff. Ignoring the warnings of the villagers, Caleb dismissed the legend as a mere tale. He believed that if he could meet Elior and learn his secrets, he would become the greatest musician in history. Drawn by the haunting music, Caleb climbed the cliff. There, under the moonlight, he saw Elior sitting alone. His gaunt figure hunched over, and his skeletal fingers moved gracefully over the violin strings. Each note seemed to pierce Caleb's chest, pulling at his very essence. "You wish to learn my music?" Elior spoke, his voice echoing as though it came from the void itself. "Be careful what you wish for my music is not born from mere emotion. It is born from souls, including your own." Driven by ambition, Caleb ignored the warning and nodded. Elior's lips curled into a cold, lifeless smile. He began to play a new melody, and immediately, Caleb felt his body freeze. His vision blurred as horrifying images filled his mind. Hundreds of tortured souls trapped in the violin, their faces twisted in pain, their hollow eyes staring back at him, begging for release. As the final note of the melody rang out, Caleb's body disintegrated into ash, and his soul was pulled into the violin. From that night onward, hear Elior's violin, you must resist the urge to follow it. Those who approach the cliff will be consumed by darkness. The music will strip their soul from their body, and they will forever become part of the cursed melody. A traveler who once escaped the sound claimed that in his dreams, he could still see Elior on the cliff. Under the pale moonlight, Elior played his violin, and from within it, countless tormented faces stared back, crying, screaming, and calling for salvation. Do not listen to the music under the moon. Do not answer the call of the darkness. Once you hear it, your soul is no longer yours. Story 5. The Ghost in the Graveyard. Deep in a dark, ancient forest lies an old cemetery, long abandoned by the world but forever cursed. The villagers nearby live in fear of an apparition they call the Moonlit Wraith. Every full moon, from the depths of the cemetery, a ghostly white figure appears, her long black hair flowing like shadows in the wind. Her glowing eyes pierce the darkness, and anyone who dares to meet her gaze never returns. According to legend, the Wraith was once a woman named Elena, who lived in the village centuries ago. Elena was known for her beauty and kind heart, but her life was marked by betrayal. She fell in love with a man who promised to marry her, but on the eve of their wedding, he abandoned her for another woman. Heartbroken and humiliated, Elena sought solace in the nearby cemetery, where she often went to reflect. But her pain did not end there. The villagers, suspicious of her ethereal beauty and strange aura, accused her of witchcraft. On a moonlit night, they dragged her to the cemetery, accusing her of bringing misfortune to the village. They buried her alive in an unmarked grave, silencing her screams beneath the cold earth. Before she drew her last breath, Elena cursed the villagers. "I will return, and you will pay for your sins. Anyone who steps into this place will belong to me." Elena's death was not the end. Her rage and despair transformed her into a vengeful spirit, tethered to the cemetery, forever seeking retribution. The cemetery, by day, is eerily quiet, with its crumbling tombstones and overgrown vegetation. But at night, especially during a full moon, the atmosphere shifts. Shadows slither between the graves, whispers carry on the wind, and faint sobs can be heard echoing in the darkness. Villagers recount chilling encounters. Some claim to have seen Elena walking among the tombstones, her hair flowing unnaturally as though alive. Her glowing eyes seem to cut through the shadows, watching, waiting. The most terrifying experience, however, is hearing her laugh. A cold, hollow sound that freezes the blood. Those unlucky enough to enter the cemetery often feel a heavy presence behind them. If they turn around, they are greeted by Elena's haunting gaze. It is said that once she locks eyes with you, your soul is no longer your own. Over the years, dozens of people have disappeared after entering the cemetery. Their bodies are rarely found, but when they are always contorted, their faces frozen in expressions of sheer terror. Their eyes are wide open, as if they had witnessed something beyond comprehension. One story stands out among the many. A young couple ventured into the cemetery on a full moon to search for a legendary ancient grave. Armed with a camera, they planned to document their journey. It was the last time they were seen alive. The following day, villagers found the camera lying amidst broken tombstones. The footage showed the couple walking through the cemetery, laughing nervously. As the video progressed, thick fog enveloped them, and faint laughter could be heard in the distance. Then, Elena appeared on the screen. She stood behind them, her pale face illuminated by the moon, her glowing eyes filled with malice. The footage ended abruptly with a blood-curdling scream, followed by silence. A group of thrill-seeking teenagers decided to investigate the cemetery after hearing the stories. Armed with flashlights and bravado, They entered on a full moon night, dismissing the villagers' warnings. At first, all seemed quiet. The air was still, and the moonlight bathed the graves in an eerie glow. But soon, a dense fog crept in, and the temperature plummeted. Faint whispers began to echo around them, growing louder with every passing second. Then, she appeared. Elena emerged from the mist, her figure shrouded in a white, tattered gown. Her long black hair floated unnaturally, and her glowing eyes locked onto the group. She didn't speak. Instead, she smiled, a twisted, malevolent grin that sent shivers through their spines. The group ran, but the cemetery seemed to shift around them, turning into a labyrinth of graves and shadows. One by one, they were pulled into the darkness, their screams swallowed by the night. The last to survive fell to his knees, begging for mercy. Elena raised her hand, and shadowy figures rose from the ground, dragging him into an unmarked grave. When dawn broke, the villagers found only their abandoned belongings scattered across the cemetery gates. The teenagers were never seen again. With each soul she claims, Elena grows stronger. The cemetery has become more than just a resting place for the dead. It is a gateway to a realm of eternal torment, where the souls of her victims are trapped, their cries mingling with the cold night air during every full moon. The legend ends with a chilling warning. If you hear footsteps behind you in the cemetery, keep walking and do not turn around. If you see glowing eyes in the darkness, run, but do not hope to escape. Once Elena sees you, your soul is hers forever. Story 6. The Goddess of Darkness. Long ago, in a kingdom lost to time, there existed a cult devoted to Lilith, the goddess of darkness and chaos. Lilith was once a human soul, betrayed and burned alive by those she had once protected. Before her death, she vowed to return, bringing vengeance and eternal despair to those who had wronged her. The cult worshipped Lilith not just as a deity, but as an omnipotent force capable of granting immortality. They conducted blood sacrifices to open a portal to the abyss, believing Lilith would bless them with power. On a night of the blood moon, the final ritual was completed, and Lilith emerged from the shadows. She was no longer human. Her form was otherworldly, with massive curved horns, glowing red eyes like infernal flames, and skin marred with scars that bore the pain of her betrayal. A pentagram marked her forehead, a testament to the dark forces she now controlled. Lilith did not come to grant blessings, but to exact revenge. She consumed the souls of those who summoned her, leaving their bodies as lifeless husks. Lilith didn't just destroy the kingdom that betrayed her. She cursed the entire land, plunging it into perpetual darkness. Under her rule, the land became a desolate wasteland where light dared not tread. Every soul that stepped into her domain was torn from its body, fueling her insatiable hunger for vengeance and power. It is said that whenever Lilith appears, her malevolent laughter echoes across the land, heralding doom. Rivers ran red with blood, and anyone who dared face her was incinerated by the black flames that burned in her chest. Despite Lilith's curse, there were those foolish enough to seek her power. A coven of young witches, enchanted by the legend of Lilith, decided to summon her, believing they could harness her strength for their own ambitions. They gathered at an ancient, crumbling temple said to be the gateway to Lilith's realm. On a stormy night, the coven performed the forbidden ritual. They etched ancient sigils into the ground and completed the rite with fresh blood. As the final incantation was spoken, black flames erupted, and Lilith appeared. But instead of submitting to them, Lilith laughed, her voice reverberating through the temple like a death knell. She spoke, "You think you can control me? I am no servant. I am the nightmare, and now you will become a part of me." Lilith raised her clawed hand, releasing tendrils of darkness that consumed the witches one by one. Their screams filled the air as their bodies were torn apart from within. Their souls were absorbed into Lilith's form, adding to her unholy power, while their lifeless bodies crumbled into ash. Lilith, adorned in blood dripping from her face, turned her gaze to the world beyond. Her presence corrupted everything it touched, destroying villages overnight and filling the air with the wails of tormented souls. It is said that Lilith awaits the rise of another blood moon, when the portal between the human world and the abyss will fully open. When that day comes, she will unleash total darkness, consuming the earth and enslaving every soul. A warning is inscribed on the walls of the ancient temple where Lilith first appeared. When the blood moon rises, do not look to the sky. When the darkness bleeds, do not utter her name. For if Lilith hears you, you will no longer belong to this world. The legend claims that Lilith still roams the earth, searching for souls strong enough to complete her curse. Those foolish enough to pursue her power fall victim to her traps, becoming part of her eternal nightmare. Her image is burned into the minds of those who encounter her. Towering horns, burning red eyes, and a blackened tongue dripping with blood. Survivors never truly escape her grasp. If you hear laughter echoing from the shadows, do not look back. If you feel her cold breath behind you, pray. For once Lilith sees you, your soul will belong to her for all eternity. Story 7. The Keeper of the Web. Long ago, deep within a forest so dense that sunlight could barely penetrate, lay a place shrouded in darkness and dread. It was called the Webbed Forest, named for the massive webs that covered every tree, forming a labyrinthine trap for anyone who dared to enter. Legend has it that this forest was not just home to ordinary creatures, but the domain of an ancient being known as the Keeper of the Web. She was neither human nor a typical ghost. The Keeper was the embodiment of pain, betrayal, and shattered dreams. Her purpose was to punish the weak, those who allowed themselves to be trampled upon, and to teach them a final harrowing lesson about self-worth. According to legend, the Keeper was once a woman named Isolde, who lived in a small village near the forest. Isolde was known for her beauty and kindness, but these virtues made her a target of jealousy. Those she trusted most used her, manipulated her, and eventually betrayed her. One moonlit night, Isolde was falsely accused of witchcraft and exiled by the very people she had cared for. She fled into the forest, where the massive webs seemed to await her. Broken and filled with despair, Isolde cursed those who had wronged her. "I will return, and those who allow themselves to be crushed will suffer the same fate as me. They will be trapped in their own pain forever." Her curse transformed her into an immortal entity. Her flesh fused with the webs, turning her into the Keeper, a horrifying figure with empty, abyssal eyes, her body draped in bloodied webs, and claw-like hands ready to ensnare the souls of the lost. The Keeper doesn't hunt her prey like other spirits. Instead, she waits for lost souls to wander into her domain. These are people who have been broken by life, betrayed or crushed under the weight of others' expectations, seeking solace in the forest's shadows. When such a soul enters the forest, the Keeper's webs begin to close in, trapping them. There is no escape, no light to guide the way. The webs don't just hold their bodies, but also ensnare their minds, forcing them to confront their most painful memories. Those who lack the courage to face their truths are slowly absorbed into the webs, becoming part of the forest. They never die but remain eternally bound. their cries of agony merging with the howling wind that echoes through the trees. Mira was a young woman, timid and shy. Her life had been defined by her efforts to please others in the hope of earning their love and acceptance. But all she ever received in return was scorn. Her lover betrayed her friends used her, and her family criticized her relentlessly. One day, unable to bear the weight of her pain any longer, Mira fled into the forest, seeking either peace or an end to her suffering. But instead of solace, she found herself surrounded by massive webs, glistening with an eerie blood-red glow. She felt unseen eyes watching her every move. Then the keeper appeared, her towering figure cloaked in darkness, her hollow eyes reflecting all of Mira's pain and regrets. "You have allowed others to steal your worth," the keeper said, her voice a symphony of whispers. "They walked over you, drained you, and now you stand here, broken. But you have a choice. Face the truth and reclaim yourself, or remain trapped here forever." The keeper led Mira to the heart of the forest, where massive webs stretched between the trees. Within them, Mira saw faces, twisted and distorted. They were the souls of others who had failed the keeper's test, now trapped in eternal torment. The keeper handed Mira a small, cracked mirror wrapped in sticky, blood-stained webbing. "Look into this mirror," she commanded. "If you have the courage to confront what you've allowed yourself to become, you will be free. But if you falter, you will become part of my web, like the others." Trembling, Mira looked into the mirror. She saw her reflection, not as the weak and broken person she thought she was, but as someone strong, capable, and buried beneath years of fear and pain. Memories of every betrayal and insult surged through her mind, but with them came a spark of defiance. "I will not let them control me anymore," Mira said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I deserve better. I will take back my life." The keeper let out a soft, haunting laugh. "Then go, and live as you have declared. But remember, strength must be earned every day." The forest began to brighten as Mira walked out, the webs retracting into the shadows. When she emerged, sunlight touched her skin for the first time in days. Mira was no longer the timid girl who had entered the forest. She was transformed, radiating a quiet, unshakable strength. From that day forward, anyone who tried to manipulate or harm Mira found themselves unable to overpower her. Her eyes carried a strange, otherworldly intensity, as though the keeper's presence still lingered within her. The keeper remains in the forest, waiting for more lost souls to wander into her domain. Some seek power, others seek redemption, but not all are strong enough to face the truths she forces them to see. Survivors tell of a single, unyielding warning. If you hear whispers in the darkness, do not follow them. If you feel the webs brush against your skin, pray. For once the keeper sees you, you must face yourself. And not everyone survives that trial. Story 8. The Screams in the Cursed Forest. In a desolate land long forgotten, there lies a forest known as the Screaming Woods. By day, the forest is eerily silent, but when night falls, it comes alive with chilling screams and ghostly whispers. These sounds do not belong to animals or humans, but to the wailing spirits, nightmarish entities that haunt the forest. It is said that anyone who ventures into the forest after sunset is never seen again. Those who do return are driven insane, haunted forever by the echoing screams that refuse to leave their minds. Legend has it that centuries ago, this forest was the site of a horrifying tragedy. A small village nestled deep within the woods was ravaged by war and famine. In their desperation, the villagers turned to dark rituals, abducting and sacrificing innocent people to appease malevolent forces in exchange for survival. But instead of salvation, their rituals summoned an ancient entity from the abyss. This being, uncontrollable and malevolent, consumed the souls of the villagers, transforming them into wailing spirits doomed to wander the forest for eternity. Since then, the forest has been cursed, haunted by the agonized cries of those restless souls. The spirits in the forest no longer resemble the humans they once were. Their twisted forms are gaunt, their flesh decayed, and their glowing eyes pierce through the darkness. Their screams are not mere sounds. They carry the weight of anguish and rage, capable of driving anyone who hears them to madness. When the wailing spirits appear, a thick fog engulfs the forest, blocking out all light and erasing any paths to escape. Their screams echo from every direction, making it impossible to tell where they are until it's too late. One day, a group of young thrill-seekers decided to explore the forest, determined to prove that the legend was nothing more than a myth. Armed with flashlights, maps, and recording devices, they ventured in, confident that science would uncover the truth behind the mysterious screams. They entered the forest in the late afternoon, and at first, everything seemed normal. The trees were dense and the air was heavy, but it was quiet. Too quiet. As night fell, the forest transformed. A thick, eerie fog rolled in, the temperature dropped sharply, and faint whispers began to echo around them. Anna, one of the group members, stopped when she saw the faint silhouette of a crying woman by an old tree. She called out to the others, but when they looked, the figure had vanished. Moments later, a blood-curdling scream tore through the forest, shaking the ground beneath them. From the fog emerged the wailing spirits, their skeletal forms draped in tattered, ghostly shrouds. Their mouths opened unnaturally wide, unleashing deafening screams, and their glowing eyes locked onto the group. In sheer panic, the group scattered, running blindly through the forest, but every path seemed to lead them deeper into the fog. One by one, the adventurers disappeared, their screams swallowed by the forest's unnatural silence. Anna, the last remaining member, stumbled into a clearing where dozens of skeletal remains lay scattered. It was as if every soul who had entered the forest had been devoured here. As Anna looked up, a larger, more terrifying spirit emerged from the mist. It was the ancient entity that had cursed the forest, its form towering and grotesque. Its fiery eyes bore into Anna as it spoke in a voice that resonated like the howling wind. "You dared to trespass into my domain," it said. "Now you shall join the eternal wail." Anna let out one final scream before the fog consumed her completely. The next morning, the villagers living near the forest found a recording device left at the forest's edge. When they played it, they heard screams, desperate cries for help, and finally, faint whispers. "Run, but no one escapes." Since then, no one has dared to enter the forest. But on foggy nights, the screams still echo through the trees, a haunting reminder that the forest is alive and that its restless spirits are still searching for freedom. If you hear screams coming from the forest, turn away and run. But remember, once they see you, your soul will belong to them forever. Story 9. The Ghost in the Mirror. It is often said that mirrors do not merely reflect images, but also serve as portals to other worlds. In a remote village, there was an ancient mirror passed down through generations, but it carried with it a terrifying curse. Anyone who dared to look into the mirror at midnight, under the light of the moon, would not see their reflection, but the face of a dreadful entity known as the ghost in the mirror. Centuries ago, the mirror belonged to a woman named Eleanor, a witch who lived in seclusion deep within the woods. Eleanor was falsely accused by the villagers of causing a series of mysterious deaths. One night, they dragged her from her cottage, burned everything she owned, and forced her to stare into the ancient mirror while she was burned alive. Before she died, Eleanor cursed the mirror, vowing that her spirit would never leave it. She swore that anyone who saw her reflection in the mirror would suffer the same fate. Their soul would be pulled into the mirror, trapped in an endless void, while their body would become a lifeless shell. The mirror was forgotten for years until it was discovered in Eleanor's abandoned cottage. The first person to claim it was a merchant, but days later he was found dead in front of the mirror, his face twisted in terror, his eyes hollow as if his soul had been drained. Since then, the villagers avoided the mirror, hiding it in a deep underground chamber. However, stories of the cursed mirror persisted. People said that if you stared at it for too long, your face would begin to fade, replaced by Eleanor's, a skeletal visage with glowing white eyes and a twisted, deathly grin. One day, a young girl named Anna, curious about the village legends, ventured into the underground chamber where the mirror was hidden. Ignoring all warnings, Anna brought the mirror back to her home, determined to see if the stories were true. That night, as the moonlight streamed through her window, Anna gazed into the mirror. At first, she saw only her reflection, but soon her face began to distort. Her features faded, and in their place appeared another face. Pale, skeletal, with hollow eyes that glowed like embers and a grin that chilled her to the core. It was Eleanor. Before Anna could turn away, a whisper echoed from the mirror. "You've seen me. Now your soul is mine." Neighbors heard Anna's blood-curdling scream echo through the night. When they arrived, all they found was the mirror standing in the middle of the room. Anna was gone without a trace. Yet, on the surface of the mirror, they saw a new reflection. Anna's face, frozen in terror, forever trapped within the glass. It is said that the mirror still exists somewhere, waiting for its next victim. If you stare into it for too long, you won't just see your own reflection, but also Eleanor and the countless souls she has claimed. Once you see her, there is no escape. Beware of mirrors in the darkness. Don't stare into them for too long, for if you see Eleanor's face, your soul will belong to her forever. Story 10. The Curse of the Soul, Smoke. In a forgotten valley, there lies a small village shrouded in thick mist all year round, a place called the Misty Village. The fog is unlike any other. It clings to the ground, dense and suffocating, as if the clouds themselves have swallowed the village whole. Locals whisper that the mist is not natural but the embodiment of cursed souls, forever wandering in darkness. Centuries ago, the village was a prosperous haven. But everything changed when a powerful witch named Morgana arrived. Morgana was an outcast, shunned by society and accused of bringing misfortune to the land. When mysterious deaths began to plague the village, the people turned against her. One fateful night, the villagers dragged Morgana to the town square where they burned her alive at the stake. As the flames consumed her, Morgana uttered a curse. "I will return. The flames that destroyed me will become mist, and every breath you take will be eternal suffering. Your souls will belong to me." As Morgana's body burned, a column of black smoke rose from the fire, enveloping the village. From that day onward, the mist never lifted, and those who dared to enter the cursed village never returned. It is said that the mist is not merely fog, but a collection of tortured souls bound by Morgana's curse. Faces appear within the swirling haze, twisted and ghastly, whispering and screaming in torment. When night falls, the mist thickens, and skull-like forms emerge, as if Morgana herself is watching through the smoke. The mist is alive, hunting for new souls to claim. Those who wander too close are ensnared, their spirits torn from their bodies. Survivors tell of seeing Morgana's face in the fog, a skeletal visage with glowing eyes and a sinister grin, before they narrowly escaped the grasp of death. One day, a group of adventurous young people, skeptical of the legend, decided to explore the village. Determined to debunk the tales, they equipped themselves with flashlights, cameras, and recording devices, confident that science would reveal the truth. As they entered the misty forest surrounding the village, the air grew colder and visibility diminished. At first, the only sound was their footsteps crunching on the damp ground. But as they ventured deeper, whispers began to echo through the fog. Jack, one of the group, stopped abruptly, claiming he heard someone calling his name. When he turned around, there was nothing but mist. When they reached the center of the abandoned village, an eerie blue flame suddenly ignited in the middle of the square. From the flame, smoke rose and coalesced into a massive, ghastly face. The face of Morgana. Her glowing eyes pierced through the darkness, and her voice reverberated through the air. "You dare trespass in my domain. Your souls will now pay the price." Before the group could react, the mist surged toward them, wrapping around each of them like living tendrils. Their screams echoed briefly before being swallowed by silence. The next morning, locals found the explorers' abandoned equipment at the forest's edge, but there was no sign of the group. When they played back the recordings, they heard faint whispers, frantic screams, and finally, a chilling image of a skull-like face appearing in the mist, its eyes burning with fiery intensity. The recording ended with a bone-chilling laugh. Morgana's curse lives on. On foggy nights, people near the village report hearing screams and whispers carried by the wind. The souls trapped in the mist remain imprisoned, unable to find peace, while Morgana waits for new victims. If you see an unusually dense mist, stay away. Don't breathe it in. Don't stare into it. For once Morgana sees you, your soul will become part of the smoke forever.